What if the very thing driving your success, your intensity, your relentless dedication to your work, is actually the thing standing between you and the life you truly want? That was the case for today's guest, George Bryant. A former Marine turned wildly successful entrepreneur, George built an empire fueled by intensity. But beneath the surface was a man stuck in survival mode, afraid to slow down, unable to rest, and completely disconnected from himself. In this conversation, George shares the moment he walked away from it all, his seven-figure business, his public identity, his grand plans, and began the slow, sacred process of healing himself and redesigning his business. We talk about the difference between discipline and devotion, what it really takes to build a sustainable business from the inside out, and how his powerful tool, the wedge of expectations, can help you make consistent progress even when you're at your lowest capacity. This conversation is emotional, profound, and full of wisdom for anyone learning to trust life and do business differently. I really hope you enjoy this deeply rested conversation with George Bryant. Welcome to Deeply Rested, the podcast that helps people doing good work in the world take incredibly good care of themselves. I'm your host, retired therapist and disillusioned business coach, Megan Megginson. I'm on a mission to help people like you unlearn the rules that keep you trapped in self-doubt so that you can recover from burnout and finally become deeply rested. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast and join our weekly newsletter at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. Now, it's time for the show. George, welcome to the Deeply Rested podcast. I would love for you to tell me about a time in your life and business when you were operating from intensity.
How long do we have?
As long as you need. /50 minutes.
/50 minutes. I think an easier question would be up until this point, when was I not operating in intensity and operating under the false belief that intensity won the game? And it would be a lot shorter answer. And I know you and I have connected a lot, and I will answer this question as well as saying that it took me 20 years of entrepreneurship and 41 years of life to figure out that people overvalue intensity and undervalue consistency. That's been probably one of the most profound lessons in my life. And so to give you a tangible example, I'll use a personal example of when I almost lost my legs in the Marine Corps. In 2005, I got what was diagnosed as exercise-induced compartment syndrome in the middle of Somalia. So my legs almost exploded open. And they told me I'd never walk again. They were going to amputate my legs. And I ended up spending 12 months in a wheelchair, having to relearn how to walk again. But in the process, became addicted to opiates and pain medication because that's how I coped with the pain. And they're like, we're going to medically separate you. We're going to, kick you out. But I had no backup plan. So intensity was the only thing that I knew. So to make a recovery, I basically figured out and made my full-time job to learn how to walk again, to regain all the functions in my legs that I'd lost, and to do all these other different things. But the short-term intensity, which got me back on active duty, which got me back into my job, led down the road 4 or 5 years later to my legs breaking 3 or 4 times, to then being out of commission numerous times because the only speed that I knew was intensity. And I operated under the belief that if I didn't have the gas pedal floored the entire time, that I was going to fail in life, and there was no time to sit down, and I had to win and do everything, which carried and correlated over into my entire entrepreneurial career. I could give you 50 lessons minimum on the short-term gain because I never recognized the long-term loss that was coming. And even on the entrepreneurial side, the amount of times that I drove the Titanic to the bottom of the ocean because I missed the signs and I was just operating so fast in intensity of well, if I just put more energy into it, if I put more money into it, if I put more time into it, then it'll magically fix the problems. And here I am on the other side of probably 8 companies that I no longer own and consulting contracts that are gone and failed ventures because I never took the time to slow down to observe. And
Mm-hmm.
so instead, I was like living inside the pill bottle. So those are like two
Mm.
tangible examples I could give
Okay.
you.
We're going to talk a lot more in a little bit about the business application of all of these lessons. I'm curious before we get into that, are you open to me asking you some follow up questions about this?
I am a wide open book, which, I want you to ask me like the
Great.
juicy, the hard, like it's my favorite.
Great. I mean, yes, deep but not hard. How about
Yeah,
that? Deep and
perfect.
painless, deep and effortless. How old were you when you joined the Marines?
So I was 17 when I joined, and then I left for boot camp maybe 2, 3 weeks after I barely graduated high school. So I was
Wow.
a snot nosed, like 18 for a couple of days, and then off into the world. The leg injury actually happened on my 21st birthday. So
Wow.
interesting. Everyone was out drinking, and I was in a foreign country that none of us wanted to be in, and that happened. But yeah, so I was young.
Mm. Wow. 21 years old, and you have this, it sounds like a life threatening
Yep.
injury with
Yep.
your legs. You made a comment a minute ago about medical separation. What is
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I was in the Marine Corps. So the rule to be in the Marine Corps is you have to be a functional tool for them to use. And because of the diagnosis, the first doctor, they did a surgery and it wasn't successful. And so then they said, hey, our only option is to take your legs, amputate them from the knee down.
Wow.
Was the option that was given to me. And I didn't like that option. By the glory of God, I fought pretty hard, got a second opinion. And then I ended up with a professional, like sports doctor who had seen this. Soccer players get it traumatically. And
Oh, wow.
if they catch it and save it potentially, and he looked at me and he's like, listen, I can save your legs, but you'll never run again. You'll never be able to train again. You'll never be able to do ABC, but like you'll have them. And I was
Mm.
like, great, give me that option. And so that
Uh-huh.
was the option that I went in.
Wow. And later, you said you actually broke your legs, like broke the bones in your legs?
Yeah. So, with all of that in your question on intensity, I lived under this belief that if I wasn't constantly pushing as hard as I could, that I would lose everything. And so, in this
Mm.
process of like relearning how to walk again, the first thing I did after making a recovery and being able to run and function is I started signing up for triathlons. And then doing the sprint triathlon wasn't enough because it wasn't intense enough.
Mm.
So then the next one was a half of an Olympic. Then it was an
Mm.
Olympic. And then it was an Ironman. And so I kept moving the finish line. And so I went from like not walking for a good year and a half to 2, 3 years later to sometimes clocking 20, 25 miles a day running. And I ran myself to stress fractures where the stress fracture turned into a bigger fracture. And then I was in a cast for 8 to 10 weeks. And so I continually just pushed and I ignored all the symptoms of my body, all the downsides of everything. And I was like, well, just put a band-aid on it, right? Like just take ibuprofen and keep going. And so that's kind of what happened.
Wow, George, that is intense.
A little bit. A
Like,
little bit.
we are talking about intensity on like every single level here. And I really appreciate you sharing this so openly. There's a sense as I'm listening to you that your speed and your intensity, the way in which you were moving through life was really connected to like a sense of survival.
Yep.
That this wasn't just a I'm going to do it because I'm supposed to do it. It feels like the roots went really deep for you. Can you say more about that?
100%. It was 100% survival and it was conditioned into me at an early age. Like growing up and basically being on my own since I was 13, social services got involved. There was drug abuse and physical abuse and sexual abuse in my life for me personally. And that survival mentality as a kid basically is like, if I didn't create it, if I didn't control it, then I was going to end up dead or alone or homeless or all of it. And I take that whole childhood and then I joined the Marine Corps. It's something that they basically take and turn into a superpower, right? Like they tell us like
Right.
Marines don't die. Like pain is
Whoa.
weakness leaving the body is like it was on our t-shirts, it was on billboards, and it's
Mm.
like something that's ingrained into you. And
Right.
so
It's not even subtle.
no, it is very, very direct in front of you. And the whole
Yeah.
culture is you don't feel pain, right? There's
Golly.
always more to give, there's always more to
Mm.
do. And so it was 100% survival, and it had been my whole life. Like my earliest memories were like having to fend for myself or having to fight for myself. And so You're the first person that, without me telling the story, has pulled that out and been like, you are 100% correct. And until I was like 33, like 7, 8 years ago, where like it hit me that I'd never lived a day in my life, I'd been basically surviving in every area, which certain situations, and even the smallest ones that would be, an inconvenience to somebody or a bad day to somebody, felt life or death to me, because there was no guarantee that like I was going to be safe, or that I would have a home, or that I would have food. It was like very much feast or famine, and an inkling of famine, it was catastrophizing everything.
Yeah.
And then it was like operator came over, where I'm like, okay, here
Right.
we go. And there was never temperance. It was only one speed. And that one speed of intensity, it almost cost me everything multiple times, my life, in dangerous, reckless situations, because the downside to that speed is when you take it out of a survival mechanism, but then you go pursue an active sport like skydiving, right? Like I skydived 1,000 times and like, oh, I'm going to downhill mountain bike. So where's the biggest cliff I can jump off of? And then, you break part of your body, or snowboarding. And I'm like, where's the biggest one? And the thing that like carried through,
Yeah.
I became so conditioned to that feast or famine and survival that if there wasn't chaos around me, I would create chaos. So I had meaning inside of normal moments. So I would catastrophize everything, because calm and peaceful and rested was more uneasy for me than
Right.
chaos.
Right. Have you ever heard the expression of like the frog boiling in the pot of water? It's like, that's the image that I'm getting as you're describing the story, that we all adapt relative to our life experiences. And I hear that for you, that you've been through so many traumas in your life. Your whole life up to that point was lived at such a high intensity that you became, you're the frog in the water. Like, you didn't know the water was boiling because that's what you were used to. You had kind of adapted to this level of intensity in your life. And then you're moving through the world looking for spaces and places that match or exceed that level of intensity. And I hear the way that sets you up for damage, like literal, like damage to your physical body, your bones, but also your spirit. But I see the flip side of it too, George, which is your incredible resiliency as a human being. I mean, wow, I am blown away by your spirit and the way you have navigated this world with such courage and bravery and persistence, which we're going to get to in a minute, and how that has transformed into the way you support business owners now, which I think is incredible. But I just want to pause here and say, wow, you are a really resilient human being, and I'm grateful to receive your story.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you asking.
And I get the sense that in some ways the dots are connecting. I'm going to process out loud here.
Yeah, please.
This isn't polished. Hearing you talk about your experience in the Marine Corps, which I think is probably one of the most intense containers a human being can be placed inside of in this world. And in some ways, it feels like an amplified microcosm of the way society conditions all of us to believe that we should ignore the wisdom of our bodies. Right? That like, you have a job, you are a cog in a machine, and your purpose here is to produce something for somebody else. And if you feel tired, if you feel weak, if you feel injured, well, that's just like, who cares? Just sweep it under the rug or get it dealt with so that you can continue operating inside of this larger system. And I'm kind of curious to hear from you how the lessons you learned in this microcosm of the Marine Corps like also showed up or repeated themselves in different ways when you became a full-time entrepreneur. What lessons or norms did you see repeated in the entrepreneurial space?
That's such a good question. It's almost identical. And the labels that we would give it now would be the hustle culture, the burnout culture, right? The lone wolf syndrome in entrepreneurship. And I can't say that I didn't find any lesson that didn't completely correlate over into entrepreneurship, right? And even to your point, outside of entrepreneurship, things that I still see now in the quote unquote industrial world that we live in, where the check the boxes to go to work. And it wasn't even just a suppression of like the physical aspect, the emotional aspect, the mental aspect, the spiritual aspect, right? It created this breeding ground. The identical nature is like, it was this breeding ground to be a robot and to turn off the number one gift that we have, which is our humanity and our unique experience moving through the world. And the hardest part of transitioning from the Marine Corps into entrepreneurship wasn't that entrepreneurship was hard. It's that entrepreneurship was almost identical. The more I suppressed, the more I was celebrated. The more I hustled, the more the world rewarded me. And they're like, you're winning because it's financial. You're X because it's Y. And it really was this prison that I held the key to. But to the question and to the biggest point in the takeaway is that I had never lived a day in my life. I didn't have presence. I couldn't stop. I couldn't smell the roses, for lack of a better analogy. I didn't realize the water around me was scalding my skin. Right. And because intensity was the only flavor I knew, that's the only place I knew to push. And I ended up pushing until I broke. The craziest thing about my life and my body is physically broken wasn't an option. I was like, I will have no legs and no arms, and I will still finish this race. It was the emotional break that was the hardest, right? Like my spirit was broken because I had done enough and pushed enough that I realized that no matter how many of those stones I turned over, my identity still wasn't underneath them. My joy still wasn't underneath them. My happiness still wasn't underneath them. And that was the biggest hidden epidemic of all of it, is that I realized that in this whole process of becoming this man and pushing and pushing and pushing, is that I really didn't know who that man was. I was the world's version of me. It was how I could perform, how I could speak, how I could relate, how I could suppress. No sense of identity whatsoever. I didn't know who I was as a friend, who I was as a father, who I was as a business partner, who I was as a coach. I knew that I could outcoach you and I could outspeak you, and I always had the answer, but I had no identity. I couldn't sit still for 30 seconds without having a panic attack. Like there had to be something going on. I couldn't be the guy that could be in this conversation and not have something to say, because the only way you could truly value me is if I had the answer. I couldn't go into a problem and say, hey, that's not my skill set. Somebody is more qualified. I'm like, my only option is I have to do this, because if not, I'm not valuable. And so it created this entire cosmos of, if I wasn't living doing, meaning like if it wasn't me in any single situation or any single bucket pushing or trying or learning or speaking or growing, that intrinsically as a human, I didn't belong in that situation. And in entrepreneurship, it's the same, unless you become aware of it, right? And like I told you, I celebrate you all the time. I talk about you all the time, because I became the version of me that the world said I should become. Well, he's on Instagram because he should be. He's doing email marketing because he should be. He's speaking because he should be. He's working out because he should be. He's X because he should be. But there was never, number one, the space for me to say, well, who do I want to be? And even the permission slip or awareness to explore that, because I'd never seen that in my life. And so that's why my first foray into entrepreneurship was massively successful on paper. The most money I'd ever made, the labels, right, that everybody celebrates before. He's a New York Times bestseller. He had a #1 app in the world. He had 1 million followers on social media. And then what everybody failed to recognize is that I was copiously overweight. I was struggling with addiction. I was completely empty. I couldn't sit still or be by myself. And I had everything that the world said I needed to be successful. And yet I was more empty and unhappy than I was when I had nothing.
What was the bottom of the barrel for you? And part two, what did the beginning of your journey to real self-discovery look like?
Yeah, we out here now. I love this. The bottom of the barrel, and this is something that I like to share with people. I don't want to say I wish it was one catalytic moment, but it wasn't a day or a week. It was a season. It was like 2 years of thinking I was at the bottom and then finding a way to dig myself even deeper. and even deeper. And it was to something that I love about you is ignoring the innate wisdom in me and becoming a victim to that water and then self-sabotaging in the process. And I'd say there were a couple of moments that started to change my awareness when my ex-wife had left me a few times because it was unhealthy and toxic to be around that trauma compensating behavior, right? Like victim, woohoo me. But it wasn't truly until my son was born. He's 8.5 now. My son was born. And I remember holding him for the first time and not having words or not having something to do, but feeling completely unqualified and also not able to be a father because I couldn't sit still. I couldn't be there. I couldn't be present. And that was like the big catalyst for me in the lens of starting to break. And it wasn't breakthrough, it was complete breakdown. And it was almost like I froze and I was so numb. And I'll never forget this one therapist. I love them to pieces. I used to say things like, I'm just destined to be this way. Like, I'm like a robot. Like, I can't feel. Like, there's no way that I can feel. And I'll never forget him. His name was Sam. He was a trained psychologist, but I was seeing him in a different capacity. And he looked me dead in the eyes and he's like, you do realize numb is a feeling, right? And for whatever reason, that statement like shattered my glass house because I had done such a good job convincing myself that like, this is just how I was supposed to be. There is no way out, no matter how many modalities I do, how much therapy I do, no matter how much of anything I do. And when he said that to me, it was like 30 years of unexpressed emotions came out instantly. And I mean, I cried for weeks. Like there wasn't a moment where I wasn't crying. And it was that big release that started to change my perspective because every coping mechanism and survival mechanism I was convinced that I had, and I had it all dialed, just instantly shattered. And the weirdest thing happened, the dichotomy of it, of like, these feelings are so intense to feel. And I don't want to feel them. Yet on the other side of each one of these feelings, I feel better. And it was like I'd never been taught how to feel or ever been taught how to express my emotions or ever been taught how to just release anything. And so that was like the big moment where it was like this culmination of every hiding place I had. Money removed, success removed, relationship removed, boom, boom, boom. And then I have this bundle of joy that I'm supposed to be a steward of and bring into this world. And I felt like I couldn't provide, all kind of culminated in this one moment. And so then the second part to your question was it became a process of almost reparenting myself at every stage of his life. Like I would hold him and he would cry, I would cry because I'd never cried and I felt safe to cry with my son. And I would start just feeling, and all these feelings that I'd repressed for so many years, the frequency would stay there, but the intensity would get less and less because I'd like off-gassed and I was like, oh, got it. And what it started to create was space, and it created a curiosity in me that like, maybe I didn't have all the answers. Maybe these coping mechanisms weren't serving me. Maybe they weren't supporting me. And then it started this, well, I would say continuous because I'm more in it now than I was back then, this journey for growth and feeling and curiosity and expansion, which led me down the lens of like breath work and becoming a breath work teacher and meditation and prayer and speaking and all these other modalities that I dialed in. But what it felt like is that, to the point of the frog in the boiling water, is the only reason I kept telling that story and reliving that story is because I didn't know I could write another book. And my son became the catalyst where I'd spent my whole life trying to add chapter and chapter and chapter and chapter to a book. And he became the conclusion of that book and gave me a spark or inspiration to pick up a pen and say, okay, what do I want to write? Like, who do I want to become? And that became this journey of like truthfully reparenting myself. And now that he's 8.5, there were moments when he was 2.5 and he did something quote unquote wrong, like something broke. And I understood the power of epigenetics because his first thing was like, should I be ashamed of this? And every part of me, and then I was like, it's completely okay. It's totally fine. We can replace this. We can do this. And I was like reparenting myself in the process to like release the perfection, or that if I don't do it perfectly, somebody dies, or I won't have A or I won't have B. And so it kickstarted what I would continue to say now is my focus every day, which is having a deeply connected, integrous relationship with myself, like honoring my feelings, creating space to breathe. And in that space, being unattached to what comes up, but allowing myself to be in that process, to be in my feelings, to be in my joy if I feel joy, or to be in the depths of my sadness if I feel sadness, but allowing the moment to just be that, which is a moment,
Wow.
to release, to move on, and then decide in that moment, what would I like to do after this moment? Not how do I suppress this moment? How do I erase it? Like, how do I honor it as it's a part of me?
Yeah.
And then what am I going to do with it? And that kind of was like the process.
Wow. Thank you so much. I'm really moved by your whole process. And as you were talking about this big cathartic release that you had, weeks of crying, that was then followed by a learning of how do I actually be in this kind of relationship with myself all the time, every single day. I just saw this image, George, of like every tear that you shed and every story that you released, every wound that you healed, a new door opens for you. And I love highlighting that right now because I think for so many of us, especially those of us who are entrepreneurs, who are single, or who are primary breadwinners for our families, there's this fear, there's this rigidity, right? Like if I fall apart, the business is going to fall apart. I'm going to end up on the street. That's like such a common chain of fears that we kind of hold in our minds and in our bodies. And what you're sharing is a beautiful example of the unexpected truth that actually, when I let myself unwind, unravel, and really feel and be with every fear, every emotion, every wound as it comes up and feel it all the way through, what happens isn't a collapse of the life that I've created. It's an expansion. It's a door opening. It's a new answer. It's a new piece of the puzzle. It's guiding us closer and closer to where we are meant to go. I love the way that you personify that in your own story. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what was happening in your business as you were going through this like huge personal evolution. What was happening? And yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's great. And your summary reminded me of like my favorite quote that I wrote down for myself a couple of years ago, which is rung true. And I have it on a sticky in my house. And it says, I often prayed for things I didn't have the character and scars to maintain. And to your point, even my pastor just did this sermon because he has a new book out called Blessed is the Spiraling. Everybody assumes that spiraling is down, when in actuality, a spiral is stepping stones that are being created for us to go up, right? To our next level. And it reminds me of that so often. And hindsight's 2020. When I was in it, it didn't feel like that, right? Like it felt like the walls were collapsing and caving in. And so
very scary.
very scary. But another thing I also tell myself, and I say this to my clients all the time, is that our perspective is the difference between our prison and our power. And this actually helps answer that question. When we live in the pill bottle, we only see it from the inside. And so when the walls start closing in, we see the pressure and more and more and more. But if I took a different human and I plopped them in the same situation without the trauma and without the label on the inside, they have a completely different perspective of opportunity. Like, oh, this isn't working, but I could change this. And it took me years to realize that my situations, to your point, were me hitting my own growth ceiling, where I was lacking the perspective of how to see it as a stepping stone to the next level, or reorganization, or a widening, or an expansion. And so what it actually looked like in business, and most people said I was psycho, is I was at the quote unquote height of my career as an entrepreneur. Worldwide book tour, clearing multiple six figures a month, 1 million followers on social media, 5 million people a month coming to my website. And I had this awakening in the middle of it. And to something that I love about you, that you call people to, is presence and space, to know their innate wisdom in their body. And I was in Costa Rica at a healing retreat in the middle of this breakdown, and they wouldn't let me participate in the breath work. And I was so pissed. I was irate. And I was like, I paid you so much money. That's what I'm here for. Fix me. And he's like, that's
Mm,
the problem. No one here can fix you. And he said,
mhm,
your biggest challenge is you have no purpose for your life.
mm,
And then I yelled again. I'm like, well, how the heck am I supposed to find that? And
mhm,
he's like, well, you're not going to find an answer because you've never been quiet enough to hear God's whispers. And I
mhm,
felt like I was getting talked to by like the Riddler. And I was
mhm,
angry. And I'm like, what do I do? And he's like, I
mhm.
just want you to go sit with a pen and a piece of paper and ask yourself, what is the purpose for my life? And he's like, you can come back when you have an answer. And I'm thinking like 5 minutes, right? I'm like, got it. Cool. I'm going to win this game.
Yeah, you're an A+ student at this point.
A plus, right? And
Yeah.
this was the first time I couldn't pull on book knowledge or manipulation or
Mhm,
positioning for survival. And it
mm,
took me 2 days to answer that question. And I went through one of those cathartic releases. I was crying, I was angry, I felt the whole spectrum of emotion. And I passed out from
mm,
exhaustion one day. And I woke up. And the moment I woke up, my pen knew what to write. And I walked over to this paper. And this is so weird to even tell this story sometimes. And all I wrote was, my purpose is to stand with structure in the face of resistance to create possibility. Did I know what it meant? Absolutely not. Is it the reason my branding is a lighthouse now? 100%, because that is the
mhm,
definition of a lighthouse.
mhm,
And in that moment, though, there was a peace in my body. And when I wrote it, it became instantly clear to me. And it was like,
mm,
I can't run this business anymore. And it wasn't
mhm,
like I wonder if, it was like this has to go. And so I made a phone call and I called my support system. I called my coaches and I was like, listen, I want to get rid of the company. And they're like, when? I'm like,
What?
today. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, I want to walk away. They're like, oh, you want to sell it? I'm like, no, I
Mhm,
want out. I want to gift it to somebody in the next 24 hours and be like, I'm outie. And so I sat and I thought of one person and I called him and I was like, I need you to sit down. This is going to sound really, really crazy. I just need you to say yes. And he's like, okay. And I was like, I have this 7-figure business, social media, all of it. I was like, in the next 24 hours, I want to give it to you. And I don't ever want to talk about it again. I don't want to be a part of it. But that whole world was the boiling water that I had created to be comfortable in.
mhm,
Unlimited attention on social media, no semblance of life, anything. And I had no backup plan. And we were not in a position financially to be able to do this. And so in that process, I basically made the hardest decision of my life and I went against everybody's advice. And it was the
mhm.
first time in my entire adult life that I'd ever made a decision for me. And
Wow.
in that process, I gave the company away and I disappeared off the internet for 3 years.
Wow.
And what that created was space. It
Mm,
created space for me to not have validation, to not have all this noise, to
mhm,
not have all these distractions. And due to the grace and blessings of God, it was like somebody did some sorcery because I had no backup plan. And then 2
mhm,
weeks later, somebody called and they're like, hey, we want you to come hang out with us at this mastermind. And I'm like, cool, I have nothing to offer. And then I'm there. And then someone's like, hey, how did you do this? And I was like, oh, well, this and this. Like, can we hire you? And I'm like, why would you hire me? And they're like, to teach this to us. And I was like, you can do
mhm,
that? And they're like, yeah. And then 20 of the 22 people in the room hired me and I became a consultant. And then
mhm,
similar to you, I was off the internet, and I was just starting to put myself in situations that I actually had the space and capacity to be in. And it rebuilt
mhm,
my entire career
mhm,
into what I do now. But it was
mhm,
this beautiful mess looking backwards where there
mhm.
was no backup plan. There was no anything except for the first time at the deepest level, I honored myself.
Wow.
And I was quiet enough to hear that voice.
I have this image coming through as I'm listening to you that you were like, maybe because you're like this strong Marine, it's like you're climbing up a cliff with a rope, like you're climbing up. So it's not repelling and you're not attached to anything. And you're just so strong and you're so intense and you're just going up and up. And this moment comes where you feel the call to let go.
Yep.
And everyone's like, don't let go, for all of these reasons. But you just know in your own spirit, I have to let go. And I don't know how far the fall is because I've been climbing for so long. I don't even know how high up I am. I don't know how far the fall is and I don't know what's at the bottom, but I know this is what I have to do. And you also knew that you needed to do it fast, but also like as you're falling, these new ropes start showing up, new people, new opportunities, and you start to really have this experience that is what so many people are seeking in their lives, which is being guided instead of forcing direction.
Yeah. Oh, that was
And I
so
think
well
it's
said.
a really beautiful story.
I have hundreds of them because since that moment, the only reason I live in Montana is because 5 years ago, I had no plan on moving, owned my home, business was good, everything was good. My daughter and ex-wife had this idea that we couldn't be in Southern California anymore. They called me after taking a girls' trip and they're like, we're moving to Montana. I'm like, when? They're like, in 2 weeks. I'd never been here. I was rebuilding the business. I was doing podcasts and events. And I agreed. And in 2 weeks, we packed up, we loaded all the cars. I had to close parts of the business that were in person. And then we came and rented 6 or 7 Airbnbs because there was nowhere to live. And I lived out of a suitcase. And magically I got here and a space opened up for me to podcast. And I found a space to do an event. And it's the reason I live in Montana. And it's been this continuous journey of not allowing my identity to be wrapped up in the things that I do or how I do them.
Yeah.
But understanding that I am me and anywhere I apply me, I can have results that I want in my life, but only if they're in the deepest levels of alignment. And that is by listening to that wisdom, but also having the courage to be able to take those chances and to take those swings. And I think the blessing in me having it all and losing it all and having it all and losing it all is that I can recreate those things at any moment, but only if it feels in alignment with me. This applies to friendships. It applies to relationships. It applies to business partnerships that I've walked away from. But I've learned at this point that if it's costing me any of my peace, it is no longer aligned. And there has to be a weeding of the garden to create space for more seeds to go in it. And I've learned that as a man of faith, right? And even in the personal development world, we always joked about this, that you can't get a new seed until you create the space for it to show up. That's the definition of faith. And it's continuing to like prune this garden and work through it over and over, not allowing it to dictate my identity or to dictate my mood, but saying that regardless of what happens on the other side of this, I can bring my full self into this. I can bring my full self into this new venture. I can bring this, and that might cost me something short term. But to your previous summary, which are always so beautiful, it's also creating that expansion for the next level, for a deeper relationship, for a deeper friendship, for a new friendship. And I left my safety net, and I lived here for 3 years and didn't even have like a close friend circle. And then in a matter of weeks, I had 16 male friends that are all men of faith, that are entrepreneurs. And it's like they showed up out of nowhere, but I had the space to have them. And now I have this deep community here. And so there's like hundreds of moments like these for me.
I mean, I can't wait to read the book. Just throwing that out there. Because I do feel like it is when people are on this journey and they're learning how to trust life in this way, it is really powerful to hear examples of other people doing it and how it has manifested for you on your journey. Not because we can map on to that, right? Like my journey in trusting life will never look or sound the same as yours. But hearing your examples, it gives our mind, our ego mind, just a little bit of like safety. Being like, oh, okay, see, like, oh, look, it happened for George. Oh, it happened for that person. It happened for that person. So I think it's such a gift when we're able to share this with each other. And the other thing that's coming up for me as I'm listening, George, is I kind of said it a minute ago, but it's something that is a theme in my personal work, which is learning to catch myself when I am trying to plan 5 steps ahead of where I am right now and catching myself and then instead going, okay, wait, hold on a second. Actually, my belief about life is that everything I am meant to have and need to have is present right here in this moment. And I can trust life much more easily when I take a deep breath and I relax and I close my eyes. Right. And I'm like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to actually stop seeking the next answer right now. And instead, I'm going to just expand my awareness around myself and my business and my life in this moment with deep curiosity. And I'm going to ask, what is here for me now? Who is here for me now? What is the next right step for me in this moment? And like magic, like you're describing, when you look around, when you've let go and you're free falling and you look around, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, the people that I need are right here. The opportunity that is meant for me is I can now hear it knocking on the door. Couldn't hear it knocking on the door before because I had a pair of headphones on and I was like watching a webinar about how to create something 10 years from now, or like whatever the story is. Like, let's take those headphones off and just be here now. And your life is such a beautiful example of how when you show up for that process again and again and again, everything works out.
It's magic. And
It's
what you
magic.
just said should be re-listened to like 55 times because it's so true. And I can give so many synopsises, right? And I hate to be like a walking fortune cookie, but anxiety comes when we think about the future and depression comes when
That's
we
right.
think about the past.
Oh, great.
And both of them are robbing us of the opportunity that's in the present, that it's not there.
Yeah.
It's that our perspective is not allowing us to see. And
Right.
for me, I've been through 12-step programs. And the one thing I remember, there was this movie with Bill Murray in it called What About Bob? But the one thing I always remember is it's baby step, baby step, baby step. And I say this to myself of like,
Yeah.
if I'm looking for the third and fourth step, I remind myself that I have to earn the right to access it.
Yeah.
Because the only way that that clarity unlocks is when I take the first one.
That's right.
And what it
Well-
does, and to your point with breath and presence, is it doesn't change anything in front of me. It turns my radio dial into presence and observation to see what I couldn't see.
Yeah.
And then I only need the first bite. Like, I don't care how good you are at jigsaw puzzles, you ain't putting more than one piece in at the same time.
That's right.
So you might flip them all over, but the moment you put a piece into the puzzle, all of a sudden 4 other pieces make sense that you couldn't see before.
That's so good. It's like when you have a puzzle out on your table. I mean, this is how we do puzzles in my house. The puzzle stays on the table for like a week or two. And you just kind of like walk past it a few times a day. And like you walk past it and you're like, oh, I see it. I was looking for that piece for an hour yesterday. And then when I'm walking past to get a drink of water, it's like, whoop, there it is. Just pops out at you. Right.
100%.
It's like, that's it. Puzzles are excellent teachers and metaphors.
100%. It's great how that is a tangible example of how your reticular activating system works, because that's what genuinely happened.
Yeah. I want to share, before we move past this point, a Rumi quote with you, if you're interested.
I would love it.
I keep this on my desktop because I need this reminder so often. Okay, so I have it right here. Here it is. When I run after what I think I want, my days are a furnace of stress and anxiety. If I sit in my own place of patience, what I need flows to me and without pain. From this, I understand that what I want also wants me, is looking for me and attracting me. There is a great secret here for anyone who can grasp it.
It's a good quote. I'm going to need you to send that one to me because I don't have the memory to write that whole thing down, but I'll take that one.
I'll send it. It feels like truly the embodiment of this entire conversation. And that last sentence, when I first found this quote years ago, something about it really spoke to me, but I didn't get it. And that last line about there's a great secret here for anyone who can grasp it, it was like it was mocking me. And it like pissed me off. I was like, well, I can't grasp it and I don't get it. I know that there's some great wisdom here, but like, what is it? And it's only been through, like, we're talking about the spirals of life, right? Because I'm just a big believer that, like, yes, we are all going through these spirals. And sometimes I'll say it like, we're just making different laps around the same track. You know, like we all have these lessons that we're trying to work through in this lifetime. And the more you relax into that and the more you really embody all these different bits and bobs that we're talking about here today, it's like the more I feel like I get the great secret. I am sure I don't get it 100%. Maybe I never will, but the more I can like feel the truth and the wisdom of just trusting and relaxing and listening and taking one baby step at a time, the calmer I feel and the more effortlessly life unfolds all around me. And that doesn't mean that we are not efforting, right? It's like, it can get a little bit sticky. There's an ease in the effort. That's what I'm aiming for. And there's beautiful lessons about, you got to chop wood and carry water. Like that's your way to bliss. That's your way to enlightenment, is to chop wood and carry water. And as business owners, we've got a lot of wood to chop and a lot of water to carry. So it's this beautiful blending of how do I let go of the rope and free fall and look around my life with curiosity and take one baby step at a time, while I'm also doing the tasks that I need to do to move things forward in my life here in the 3D world. And now, as we're coming to the end of this conversation, we finally arrive at the wedge of expectations, which feels like I love where we went in this conversation. And the plan was we were going to talk all about this wedge of expectations that you created. But because we were attuned to each other and to ourselves, we discovered that this conversation actually wanted to go somewhere different. And I trust that with every ounce of my being. And I would love for you to give us just like a brief little rundown of the wedge of expectations, specifically because I think it is a great model to help us tune into how to take the baby steps, how to chop the wood and carry the water, right? When you are on the path and you're deep in it, you're deep in the release or the awakenings or the ahas or whatever it is that's going on for you, it can feel kind of overwhelming. Like, how do I weave this in to the business that I am running right now that's paying my bills? Like, how do I do both of these things? And I think your wedge of expectations is a great tool to help us do that. So I'm going to pass the mic to you, George, and I would love for you to just teach us your methods.
I love it, because we're landing the plane. I'm going to tie it all together because
I can't wait.
It fits so well. And
great, let's land this plane.
What you just said, and for everybody listening, what Megan just said about you have to be in action or in obedience or in effort, but ease of effort to receive the gifts. The one thing that is always important for us is understanding that action is how we create the results in our life. But it's not perfect action. It's imperfect progress over and over and over again to be able to practice consistency and understand the power of consistency. So at the beginning, I said most people overvalue intensity and they undervalue consistency. One core mistake that will get in the way of all of us is thinking that there is a finish line to anything that we're setting out to achieve, which means once you work to attain something, you work to keep it, but it's not through you actually having the result. The result is a byproduct of the actions and choices that you make every single day. And so in that lens, I created a model called the wedge of expectations. And what it is it's about to honor the baby steps, but to give myself a backup plan that on the days where it feels like the walls are closing in, or that I can't do it, or there's no physical way, I can trick my brain and my body into action at a minimum viable level, which unlocks my results. Because I'd rather put 2 minutes of watering in my garden every day than skip a week and allow it to die because I didn't have an hour to garden it. Or I'd rather flip over 2 pieces of that jigsaw puzzle today because I committed to getting it done than not flip over any piece and never finish the puzzle. And the mistake that I realized I made for so long is that when I was trying to change things in my life or do things differently, I would set myself up to fail by overcommitting and not having a backup plan. And so if you think about your life in any way, it could be your business, could be your finances, could be your health, could be your sleep, could be your relationship. There's 1 to 3 core behaviors that if we do them every day consistently, we can look at paper and be like, if I do these things every day, I'm guaranteed to have that result or be 1 step closer. And when we find those behaviors, those are the things that we apply the wedge of expectations. And the wedge of expectations is really, really simple. For every behavior or every action you're going to take, let's say it's breathing every single day. Breathing is one of them. Recording podcasts is another one. And then doing your tasks in business is a third. You ask yourself 2 questions. Question number 1 is, on my absolute best day, when everything is going to plan, how much of this am I going to do? And let's just take breath work. And you're like, dude, in my dream day, I'm going to do 30 minutes of uninterrupted breath work every single day. Amazing. For my podcast, I'm going to record 2 podcasts a week because that'll get me ahead and I feel great. In my health, I'm going to sleep 8 hours a night and walk for 5,000 steps a day, right? When you ask yourself on your best day what you're going to commit to, that's what we call your ceiling. Amazing. That's where most people lose the game because they don't ask the second most important question, which is on my absolute worst day, what's the minimum I can commit to protect my progress? And that's the floor. And so for breath work, it might be I'm going to take 1 minute of intentional breaths before I go to bed. For the podcast, it's I'm going to outline 3 episodes so that I'm setting myself up for the next thing. For my health, it's I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk outside to protect my consistency. And for every tangible, measurable behavior that we have in our life, that we know that if we follow this plan, it's going to get us closer or ideally to our goal. We ask ourselves, what's my dream? And then what's my floor, which is what's my ceiling and what's my floor. And here's the magic of this model. I don't care if you hit your ceilings. All I care is that every single day you protect your floors. Because if you protect your floors, I promise you 365 days of floors is going to move you further down the line than inconsistent weeks of ceilings or burnout or using too much intensity to not feel your way through it. And the hard part of this model is it eliminates our hiding places because I have a hard time justifying that my health is important to me, but I can't go for a 10-minute walk outside in my day, or I can't stop what I'm doing, close my eyes and breathe for 1 minute minimum and then celebrate that win. And so this is a really easy way to create a structure and accountability to chopping wood and carrying water by understanding that we get to be active in the creation of the results in our lives. But if we're not on the field, we can't see those opportunities. And scrolling through Netflix and hiding behind our computer and not leaving our house is not the places where prayers are answered or breakthroughs happen. It's when we allow ourselves to get on the field in these behaviors. And so that's the wedge of expectations. It's for any behavior, any item, any habit that you ask yourself 2 questions. What's my dream day? And then what's the minimum I can commit to protect my progress? And then you constantly iterate this over your behaviors to continue to allow yourself to be on the game. Because I promise you, you cannot finish a race that you don't start. But I'd rather you be in the race and making progress than thinking about starting the race. And the floors give you the ability to stay on that field, even if it only feels like 20 minutes. But that might be matching what your capacity is today. But based on the human brain, that's just today. And you go to sleep, you wake up, and tomorrow's a new day. And you might stretch it. You might hit your ceiling or go beyond, but only if you give yourself the opportunity.
So good, George. I really appreciate you spelling that out for us. So it's like really thorough and really succinct, which chef's kiss. So good. Can I add one thing into the mix?
Please.
Just a layer that helps me stay accountable to myself. I love the way that you were talking about protecting your progress. It's such a beautiful phrase just to like file in the memory bank. Like I am protecting my progress. I am protecting my priorities. And I love that we have the ceiling and the floor and that it's like you don't even care what the floor is. It's like it doesn't even matter. I love that about this model, that it doesn't matter what you say the ceiling and the floor is, but it matters that you say something, that you make a choice. Hopefully, the choice comes from a deep listening to yourself. But you can change the ceiling and floors. I mean, this model is so incredibly flexible. You can change them as often as you want, but that you know in your own heart what the ceiling and what the floor is, and then you are holding yourself accountable to meeting the floor and to protecting your progress every single day. And it's really powerful. I'm excited to, I learned about this in preparation for this conversation, and I've been excited to create it for myself, but I wanted to wait until we talk today because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm sitting here feeling excited to really think about this as a commitment to myself. But the thing that I want to add, I know that I avoid when things start to feel like they're coming from a place of obedience or discipline, or because it just like drips with, this is what you're supposed to do. So a perspective shift that has been so helpful for me in my process is instead of thinking about doing this with discipline, I want to think about approaching it with devotion.
Yes.
That the wedge of expectations and my ceilings and my floors and the actions that I need to take to protect my floors are coming from a place of devotion for myself and for the ripple effects that I want to have in the world. And when I give myself permission to really hold the spirit of devotion in all of the actions that I take specifically for my business, it's really amazing how my relationship with my business becomes so much healthier and so much more loving and more creative and more expansive. And I think your wedge of expectations is just adding a layer of structure to the soul that helps move everything forward in a really beautiful, holistic, and most importantly, deeply rested way.
Yes.
So, George, mind blown. Thank you so much for sharing this wisdom with us.
You're so welcome. And thank you for your point. It is not about discipline. It is about devotion to what you're worthy of achieving and what you desire and what is waiting for you. And so devotion is the best way to frame that. And the one note that I'll give everybody as she's about to wrap is that part of that devotion means every bite you take gets celebrated. There is no win too big or too small. And what happens over time psychologically is that starts to rewire your reticular activating system because it's gratitude. And we know this, and scientifically we can prove this. And it's how you keep flexing the muscle of growth, finding more opportunity and honoring yourself in the process. And so some days for me, that was, I just celebrated the fact that I took a shower today. And I got to celebrate those moments, or that I wrote down 3 words to describe how I felt because I didn't have the capacity to fill up my gratitude journal. But the difference is that it was never from a place of fault, blame, guilt, or shame. It's that every single bite was celebrated as I did it. I won. I made the choice. And so it's all for devotion for your greatest good. And so we get to celebrate that because none of us win or grow without pressure. And pressure is what creates that growth. The opposite is stagnation. And we are not living in WALL-E. We don't want that. And yourself and where you are in the process, hitting your floors every day and celebrating every single bite that you take for no one other than your future self that's going to look back and say, thank you so much for caring enough about me to hit your floors every single day. Because I have the life that I desired because I honored myself and stayed devoted in that moment.
Stunning. Beautiful. I love it so much. And I'm grateful to you, George, for the journey that you have allowed yourself to go on in this life. There have been so many moments when you could have said no to healing and expansion, and you haven't. And now I and we get to bask in the glow of the healing that you've done and the wisdom that you're here to share. And there's truly no greater gift than being a witness to that. And this is where I just get so moved and excited that when we are healing ourselves and we are sharing it with each other, that we are all contributing to a healing of the collective. And there's no greater gift, there's no greater honor than getting to be a part of a collective healing. And everything that you do and represent is such a core part of that. So I am so grateful to know you and to have you here on this show. And I would love it if you would tell our listeners where they can learn more about you and the work that you are doing in the world.
100%. So like I joke, everybody at this point is either this dude is cuckoo and you'd be right no matter what. And I either want more or I don't want more. Either way, I love you to absolute pieces. And my favorite color is pink. And so if nothing more than to see the pinkest website in the world, it's mindofgeorge.com. But I have an incredible podcast. Megan has been on it. The episode was incredible, called The Mind of George Show, which is all linked on the website. And my contact info for my Instagram is there as well. And I mean this, I have a heart of service. It is my mission on this planet is to help. And so if I can help you, if I can answer a question, if I can support you anyway, just shoot me a DM on Instagram. It'll be me personally responding. Even if it's just words of gratitude or sharing an anecdote or when the wedge of expectations worked for you or you're like, oh, I'll never believe it. I have these results now. Amazing. I just want to know because I want to celebrate with you. But mindofgeorge.com, the easiest thing to remember. And my Instagram is linked there, but it's called It's George Bryant, and everything is there. And if I can serve or support you in any way, just please reach out.
I feel your sincerity and your authenticity and everything you say and do, George. And truly, it's just been a pleasure. I loved every second of this conversation. If you made it all the way to the end of this episode, amazing. Thank you for staying with George and I through this conversation. And the greatest gift that you could give to us at this point is to share it with a few friends. So other people who are pinging intuitively in your mind right now, oh, this person would love this conversation. This person needs to hear this conversation. Share the link with them and gift them this conversation. It's such a gift to help spread the word and to help spread that ripple effect of collective good that we are trying to create. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And we'll talk to you again next week on the Deeply Rested podcast. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Deeply Rested. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love to invite you to join the Deeply Rested weekly newsletter. You can sign up at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. I hope to meet you in my inbox very soon.